we've discovered that the regen cap in the game is actually 7 million, and we were able to find this through using the Selfish Shepherd Nameless Ring, which gives you Affliction, which you can use on your minions to make them degen and inversely give you regen equal to that degen, infinitely scaling through time. With Uriel's Fostering, that minion, that Roa, cannot die, so we're able to scale this to basically infinity, and I'm pairing this on my new build with Sap of Seasons, which gives you 200% LD pen. I also use a second tincture, which gives me Rage Generation, Crit Multi, and also increase my mana burn rate so I can ramp in maps much more quickly. This pairs really well with Infinite Berserk and also gives me infinite flash generation due to nodes on the tree. The rest of this build is basically just a deck stacking template. I spent about an hour from the moment I started making the build in POB to when I finished purchasing all the items and entered my first map on it, so it's quite a quick rush job, but I do think that it's a good illustration of how this build functions, and I think that this build is fairly solid all things considered, but I do want to develop this further, and if all else fails, this can be built on a Lightning Strike template. So just to demonstrate how this thing actually works, I use Selfish Shepherd as Ring. It gives you Affliction, you cast Affliction on your Roa, and then immediately you start increasing your regen. And this number will just go up, and it's based on the amount of physical damage that your Roa is taking. And it just goes higher and higher and higher. It's a little bit hard to showcase things here. So when I do activate my tinctures, you'll see that I start burning right away. And the max life actually does go down. I think this is just an interaction between the size of the dot that you're taking and also just, you know, your pool, and at some point the size of the dot you're taking is just so large that everything will turn off. The same thing happens in Deep Delve or in Delve in general. If you get like 2,000 3,000 stacks of darkness based on what your HP is, based on what your darkness res is, at some point you will just die, even though you sort of have almost infinite regen. Well, 7 million regen eventually. So basically a non-issue. So this is the build I've set up so far. I'm gonna guess that it's somewhere around the 10 mil-ish DPS range. If I played like LS, I could have way more damage. Also to note, I use my old Fireball character, so there's a lot of suppression tattoos that I don't actually want. It really actually screws me over on the deck stacking setup, but I don't know if I want to change things later, and I'm just too cheap to untattoo them. But basically the core is I'm using Blood-Soaked Blade with that tincture because I have infinite life regen basically, right? So then I basically have the ability to sustain this forever. And there's some other really cool things. First thing to note is Nature's Concoction. Because I have so much mana burn rate and so much increased tincture effect, this gives me a lot of increased flash generation, and it's scaled even further by this. So when I have like 1,000 mana burn, which, you know, does happen in a map, that's 1,000% increased flash charges gained, and I'm getting, you know, 2 per attack. So it's really, really insane. You basically have perma progenesis. Other things to note is fairly generic as far as like how I'd imagine a deck stack and wanted to go. There wasn't anything to copy off PoE Ninja that was actually amenable to what I want to do. But again, like HD viable template, it wants to stay alive, that sort of thing. I'm playing KB, and there's a couple things to note. Firstly, I think Kobe is the one who at least let me know about this by watching this video. But if you use Tornado, you can like shotgun connect blast off of it. So I'm playing a Spell Slinger power charge on a crit Tornado setup, gives my power charge generation, and it should increase my damage significantly because of the ability to shotgun or create more overlaps with connect blast. Not really sure, but you know, Walls Arena also make a bit of a difference. I'm also running Grace PoE for now. These are things that I probably do want to change later. And then Automation Berserk, and this is able to be run because I have rage generation from this. And then because I'm the Warden Ascendancy, I'm able to make my tinctures apply to ranged weapons like wands, and then also run 2 tinctures. Oath of Winter is just nice in general. I think it's really OP, but Oath of Spring is quite interesting. So actually it's pretty hard to get enough actual hits and shocks, especially with how short shocks last. So I do need to run Sacred Wisps on Kinetic Blast in order to actually maintain Oath of Spring at close to 100%, and with like a little bit of ramp time. I was using Wrathpith Globe before, but I think that Sacred Wisps actually count as like spells basically in some shape or form. So basically when that casts, I was losing a ton of HP when I was using Wrathpith Globe. Uriel's Fostering you can't unequip, but the ring, Selfish Shepherd, that can come off. And then I'm just using, you know, Dex Gear. I found a Synth Belt. Everything was actually fairly cheap other than for Genesis. This sort of template is really cheap to get going. I think if I played this again as a melee skill with claws, it's really, really strong to switch into. Even this cluster jewel was 1 divine or something? 1 divine? Yeah, this is a one divine cluster, so there's some like really cheap stuff if you're playing off meta this patch. I think builds are becoming really expensive because if you're playing on meta, the items are highly exaggerated and their cost is just extremely really high. But a lot of failed crafts can kind of inspire you to set up for other builds. And I do think this is something that I can scale a little bit further with the existing setup and definitely with different things later on. It's really unfortunate though that you do have to drop the chest slot, because on like a stacker build, you'd want to run that less damage taken per dexterity or less damage taken per intelligence node, really powerful. So I think that the actual best use case for this is, unfortunately, a Slayer, a generic elemental damage attack lightning strike slayer that's able to get a ton of, you know, frenzy charges, which means a ton of frenzy charge or endurance charges through masterful form, and then you're able to get PDR not from Uriel's, but you're able to get it from Annihilation's approach perhaps, which is really great because, you know, it's just free perma adrenaline, and PDR from adrenaline will become even more powerful on a Slayer because you already have a good amount of endurance charges on that build, so a good amount of PDR, and that's all additive, and it basically makes your defense multiplicative. So that's where I'm kind of thinking about taking this. I don't really know if this interaction will last. I will say it might be considered a bug because it's not really supposed to be able to affect affliction, that is immune minions or invincible minions, and so this patch we found this as the sort of invincible minion. That said, I don't know it's that strong either. The chest slot this patch is really good, right? Like Tinctures is the most powerful ascendancy right now because of necrotic armor, so I mean, we'll see if it gets nerfed. Maybe yes, maybe no. But at this point, I think this technology is fairly well proliferated. Might as well share it. It's cool. It's cool to know what the regen cap, at least I think, is for now. And you know what? If you have some time, just play with it. As long as you're not using unintended interactions to, you know, mess with the economy and stuff, or do anything too crazy, I think it's probably within the bounds of, you know, use at your own risk. But if you do set up a build like this, it's probably going to get nerfed, is my guess. So don't waste money if you don't want to. But if you want to try something new, here it is.